Nobody who cares about the difference between 200 frames per second and 300 frames per second is running a 4-core chip in 2022. And if you are, you're an idiot.
Quad core Alder Lake shines. That sounds funny. Quad core Alder Lake. I wouldn't think you'd put quad core and Alder Lake together, but anyway. So you can have your quad core Alder Lake chip if you want. The new i3s.
The i7 2600K, which was one of the most popular quad-core chips of the past 10 years. Actually, 11 years ago, launched in January of 2011. 4 cores, 8 threads. But here's the thing. That was then. If you look at the games they test, they typically tested games here that don't want more cores. So of course the benchmark results looked okay. This is the most, I'm sorry, this is the most pointless freaking review ever. Because, okay, they tested what works. But I read this. I didn't see anything in here that truly acknowledged a key point. If you're playing older games, your 4-core chip will work, but so will your 5-year-old 4-core chip. They tested GTA 5. GTA 5 launched in 2013. Of course it runs on a 4-core chip. They tested World of Tanks. Okay, yes, it runs on 4 cores, but it doesn't need an Alder Lake chip. Good God!
Final Fantasy 14.
Scroll down, it'll be on the right-hand side.
2013.
Okay! Good God! Guess what? It runs great. Hey, look at this. 167 frames per second. By the way, they used a 2080 Ti for these tests.
2080 Ti?
Yeah, so I mean, like, you know, who's putting a 2080 Ti on this? If you are, just don't. You know, and of course, obviously, the higher core count chips are faster, but that's, you know, not by a lot, not enough to matter. How about we come all the way down here to a 6700K? Okay, 153 versus 167. The 6700K launched 7 years ago. This should have been eviscerated, and it wasn't. This is a puff piece. Why haven't I reviewed this? Because I'd rip it to shreds and say anybody who buys this is an idiot. Tech, you don't understand. People are on budgets and they can't afford stuff. Great! Don't upgrade your computer! 7 frickin' years ago, you can buy budget 4-core chips that are way cheaper than this, that are way more available than this, and you could have done it years and years and years ago. Mm-hmm. This is absurd in 2022. Yes, 167 is faster than 153. Anybody who uses this chart to say, but you see, look, it's look, it even beats the 8-core Rocket Lake chip. Anybody who says this is important is either a bloody idiot, or is being pedantic, or they're just stirring up crap. It is a irrelevant, bloody argument. These numbers are meaningless. These are so utterly irrelevant. What was the other one? Where's GTA 5? Look how, I mean, that's a GPU. Even at 1080p, look how little difference there is. 98 to 110. Yeah, I mean, if that doesn't tell you how utterly silly this is, I can't begin to describe how utterly silly this is.
Far Cry.
I mean...
An Ultra.
Yeah, it beats... Where's GTF? Oh, good God.
1080p. Oh, Lucy 11700 beats it. Oh, it beats the i5 11600K. Ew.
Have I made my point?
I think you've made your point. It's dead, Jim.
If you're playing games that... And there are lots of games that run on 4 cores. But if you're playing the games that run on 4 cores, you don't need a new computer. Your 6700K is fine.
Keep going with it.
Your Ryzen 3 3100 is fine. Your insert whatever. Built-in benchmarks are built-in benchmarks.
5800X? Hell no. I'm not giving up my...
Anybody who would play Red Dead Redemption 2 on an i3 12... If you want to know what is wrong with benchmarks and why benchmarks lie to you, raise your hand if all else were equal, if the price were the same, if they were both in front of you. Would you play Red Dead Redemption 2? Not run the benchmark, play the game. Would you play Red Dead Redemption 2 on an i3 12100 or... Actually, they tested the i3 12300, but that's dumb. It should be the i3 12100. Or a Ryzen 7 5800X. I'm going to make that a poll question.
Yeah, go then.
Which would you rather play Red Dead Redemption 2 on? Assume both PCs are the same price. Now, after I just gave that eviscerating speech, if any of you say i3, I'm going to throw them out.
No Tim Tams for you.
Hang on, let me go end the poll.
Ronald has a question.
8% of our chuckleheads.
Yes, that's what chat said.
Many times we have talked about how awful AMD's FX CPUs are, and objectively they are compared to modern Ryzen CPUs, and 3's pretty cool, and the latest Intel chips, which are higher core count versions of what they've sold for 5 years, but putting that issue aside, FX 8300 is pretty much crap. Or is it? We have got a comment from one of our viewers here that demonstrates that everything really is, it depends. And in this case, we've got a comment coming in from
Bryson, and he just upgraded his grandma's PC from 2 gigs of RAM on a Celeron E3200 on a hard drive to an FX 8320, 8 gigs of RAM, and an 840 Pro with a Mugen 5.
So going from an old Celeron with 2 gigs of RAM to an FX 8320 is actually a really good upgrade. And that is a Samsung 840 Pro
Correct.
SATA SSD and a Scythe Mugen 5 cooler. Granny is going to be really happy. That's going to be the SSD, the RAM, and 8 cores instead of, I think that's a 2-core chip.
1 core.
Yeah, no cores. It's like the anti-core. It's like antimatter. It's the anti-core. So I know we make fun of the FX chips. In fact, I've got one here on my desk that we like to show a lot. This is an FX 9590. I mean, the FX really are. They run, they work, I've played games on them. I've got a build upstairs with an FX 8300 and they're overclocked to 4 gigahertz. It works. It works so long. If it was the only computer in the world I had and somebody gave it to me for free and it was that or no computer at all, I'd learn to love it. I would get used to it. I would run programs that ran on it and I would just accept it.
Well, what's nice is he used spare parts to make it. So
he saved e-waste.
He did.
He didn't spend money.
Nope.
And he got Granny a big, big upgrade. And so everything in life is relative and everything it depends. I wouldn't want to daily drive an FX 8320, and I'm sure most of you wouldn't either. But
so what she's using it for
if your other option
is no computer,
or a Celeron from...
If you try and take Granny's computer away, she'll whack you with a fry pan.
Don't mess with Grandma. So in any case, if you're ever worried, here's the moral of the story. If you look at other people's computers that are better than yours and you ever feel envy or jealousy, oh, I've only got a 2060 and he got a new 3080. I've only got an i5 and he's got an i9. Oh man, I want an upgrade. Well, look, I understand. We all want everything, but whatever computer you have, almost certainly a bunch of other people out there have a worse computer. So instead of looking in this direction going, that guy's got a better computer, stop, turn your head to this side, and look at the person who has a worse computer. And instead think to yourself, I'm really grateful for the computer I have, whether it's an FX or a Pentium dual core or an i5 2400. For somebody who has, for example, a Core 2 Duo, an i5 2400 would be a nice upgrade. An FX 8300 is a big upgrade.
Yeah, he said it was literally taking 25 seconds for Windows Explorer.
Oh,
Can you imagine?
I believe it.
Granny, click a button, go make a cover, and then your page loads. Oh my God. Good job, Bryson. 2 gold stars.
That's awesome. So appreciate what you've got. You can want more, but other people have less. So sometimes it's a healthy thing to look at whatever's in front of you and go, I got a nice computer. It's okay. I'm doing just fine. I'm having a good time. I can play this game. I'll find a setting that works. I'm just going to enjoy my computer without looking at everybody else's for 5 minutes. Oh my gosh, those FX chips are absolute garbage and they were trash for years and years and nobody should be using them. I've said that before. Some people go, yeah, man, I feel you. I have one and it's just terrible. But I don't have any money to upgrade, so I have to live with it. But if we're being fair, as true as the statement is that it is, relatively speaking, trash compared to new stuff, if you want to play Overwatch, if you want to play Rocket League, if you want to play Fortnite 1080p in performance mode, an FX will do it. Now, it's not going to give you 60 frames per second, 1% lows, butter smooth, perfect performance all the time. There will be compromises. It will be jittery at times. It will absolutely be playable. And so while nobody with money should still be running one of these, if you don't have money, take those trash comments and set them aside and realize that they are meant in relation to new stuff. It's both remarkable for what it can still do and remarkable for what it can't. Ryzen 5 doesn't suck. Bad prices suck. Let me show you guys something. This is a Ryzen 5 5600X. As I'm currently recording this, it is in stock at Newegg, although it's back ordered, but you can order it for $299. Okay. It's 2021 and it's 6 cores, 12 threads. It's very fast 6 cores. It's an amazing chip. It's great, but that price is garbage. If this chip were $200 instead of $300, my entire speech would change. Let me help you out here. 6 core, 12 thread chip at 4 gigahertz. It is roughly an i7 8700 from 2017, but is not overclockable. But it's also $169, and it's also back ordered. It's welcome to 2021. Everything's back ordered. So here's why this is here. If you're going 6 cores in 2021, you're doing it because you're on a budget. Every dollar matters. I get it. I understand it. Some people are on a budget. You don't have $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 to build a computer. You just don't. And you're not going to an appreciable period of time. You want to play some games. You want to replace your old FX 8300 computer. You want to replace your old i5 2500. You are ready to get rid of that. But you look at these 8, 12, and 16 core chips, and you look at these fancy i9s and go, dude, normal people can't afford this crap. What's wrong with you, tech? I understand. The Ryzen 5 5600X is faster than the i5 10400, but not by that much. The only people who would truly notice, and I have both chips, I have benchmarked both chips, I've made videos on those chips. The only people who are really going to notice are 300 frame per second competitive esports gamers who play at 1080p low with everything turned down on 300 hertz monitors, who are, who have 1,000 hertz refresh rate keyboards and mice, and want to be in the Rainbow Six Siege League. Great, good for you. I would hope you could afford better than a 5 chip, whether it's from Intel or AMD. You should at least be on a Ryzen 7 5800X and have a full CCX complex, but whatever. For everyone else, the real world difference between an i5-10400 and a Ryzen 5 5600X is minor. That extra money is much better put into your graphics card, because remember, if you're going a 5 chip, everything in your system is a compromise. RAM is a compromise. Storage is a compromise. Graphics card's a compromise. You're doing this because you don't have $3,000 to buy an amazing computer. So if you have $3,000, you aren't freaking compromising. If you don't have $3,000, you're not buying that. I get it. The Ryzen 5 5600X, it's the price that bothers me. If you rewind on our channel a couple of years ago, when the Ryzen 5 3600 was new in 2019, we promoted the ever-loving snot out of it. Because at the time, Intel's i5 was 6 cores, 6 threads, and it was stupid. Now it's 12 threads, and it's not as stupid. So the 8400 and the 9400 were dumb because they did not have hyperthreading. And the Ryzen 5 3600, welcome back, my love.
Thank you.
Was 6 cores, 12 threads, and about a year ago, in the summer of 2020, we did several live streams talking about the Ryzen 5 3600 dropped as low as 145. We promoted the snot out of it. That was an amazing deal. And if you bought one, you got a deal. Enjoy your computer. So when I make videos titled Ryzen 5 Sucks, I am not referring to people who buy a $145 Ryzen 5 3600 a year ago because they were on a budget. I'm referring to people who buy a $300 Ryzen 5 3600X to put a 3080 or 3090 on and think 6 cores is all they need. They're out of their mind. That's stupid. But today in 2021, the Ryzen 5s are too expensive, and this is the deal, because this can be installed on that motherboard, which is a really nice board, which will run all day long, and it will let you upgrade. That has enough power delivery that if you wanted to upgrade to an i7 or an i9 in the future, you could. Maybe not with epic overclocking, but they don't have overclocking anyway. But if you wanted to upgrade when the chips are cheaper in the future.
Exactly.
And it's got fixed IO shield, it's got 2 M.2 slots, it's got 4 RAM slots, it's got decent power delivery. Think of it this way. $150 plus $170 is $320.
Yep.
The 5600X is $300 all by itself.
Just by itself.
You almost get board, chip, and cooler for the price of just the chip.
Yep. He is considering a 5600X to replace a 2700 for gaming performance. And he can utilize his 10400 PC for multitasking. So for the price of a 5800, I have 6 cores, 6 threads, 12 cores, 12 threads. There was a word in there. I mean, there was a number in there.
Asian, my friend.
Let's take a walk.
Come closer. A little bit closer. I can't smack you upside the head from that far away. Seriously. In 2021, you are going to go from a Ryzen 7 to a Ryzen 5. You're going to go from an 8-core chip to a 6-core chip. Yeah, benchmarks, whatever. Yeah, it's faster on a per-core basis. And multi-threaded, it's actually probably not slower. Your system would be a little bit more responsive. If you had a 1700, I'd almost understand. A 2700 is enough of improvement over a 1700 and not so far away from Zen 2 to make a Zen 3. It's an upgrade, but it's not a mind-blowing upgrade, and you're going to go down in core count. Dude. Okay. I fully understand that when you look at benchmark charts a 5600X will just run off from a 2700. I can't think of any gaming benchmarks where a 2700 would come out ahead unless you really dove down into maybe some frame times or frame pacing on a few select CPU-intensive games. Cyberpunk will be faster on a 5600X, but it actually might be smoother on a 2700. It might not. It'd be smoother on a 3700X. A 2700 might be old enough that it really wouldn't be. But a 5600X in that game would not be a dramatic improvement in overall playability. It might give you a higher benchmark score, but it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back. You're upgrading, but you aren't really upgrading. Multitasking. Multitasking is running more than one program at a time. Unique, separate programs. For example, gaming, watching YouTube videos, listening to music. Although you wouldn't watch videos and listen to music probably. Okay, gaming, live streaming, engaging in chat. Or editing a video in Premiere while listening to music and having Discord open. These are separate and distinct applications and programs. The memory space, the on-chip cache, the DRAM bandwidth on the system, the PCI Express bandwidth, storage access is unique between those programs. Adobe Premiere Pro, Discord, Chrome, Firefox, OBS, a game. These things do not cooperate. They don't know about each other's existence. They don't know what each other are doing. And they could each ask for the same resources at the same time. Windows' job, or Linux or Mac OS, doesn't really matter. They're all preemptive multitasking OSs now. So the operating system's job is to go, oh, well, Premiere wants to access drive D. But the game wants to access drive D. Well, they can't both do it at the same time. They basically can. I mean, they can go into a queue and it's very, very responsive. The fact of the matter is it does kind of go in sequential order. There's only so much bandwidth and there's only so many interrupt requests on the PCI Express bus. There's only so much DRAM bandwidth. If Adobe wants all of your DDR4 or DDR5 RAM bandwidth, and then OBS is trying to use it, and then NVIDIA Shadowplay is capturing something, and then Chrome is updating something in the background, and then you've got game launchers in the bottom. Maybe Steam's down there, and it just decided, hey, this is a perfectly good idea to start updating a game. I'll go check for game updates. Never mind that you're doing other stuff with your computer. None of these things cooperate, and they all compete with system resources. That's multitasking. Each CPU core has a pipeline. Hyper-threaded CPUs, or SMT in the case of AMD, have essentially a partial core, not a real execution unit, but they can sort of schedule 2 threads at the same time so that they can do prefetch. They can start pulling data from memory, pulling data from RAM, or pulling data from the on-chip cache, and so they can fill up their pipeline more effectively. That's why some applications use hyper-threading very well, and some applications don't use it at all. Games especially tend to be pretty poor at using it. So your CPU has to respond to all these different requests that are competing with each other. Having more cores, even if they're slower, can actually make your system faster. But the benefit to more cores is that if you're using 6 cores on a 6-thread chip, any additional CPU demand, no matter how fast your 6 cores are, will put an interrupt in there and will stop a task that your CPU is doing. Anything, background game update, listening to music, Discord, web browsers, anything. If you're playing a game that is using 6 cores and you do something else, there's an interrupt in there somewhere. What do you get? A 1% low frame time hitch. Not always. It depends upon the circumstances, but you can and will get those. On a slower 8-core chip, say a Ryzen 7 2700X, your overall frame rate, your average frame rate, will be lower than a 3600X or 5600X. But your 1% lows may very well be better. Input lag will be better. Because if you're playing a game that only needs 6 cores on an 8-core chip, then the minute something else wants to do something, there are free CPU resources sitting there idly waiting for something to do. On a 6-core chip, those extra cores may give you great performance. I mean, the faster cores, but fewer of them, give you great gaming performance, but 100% of them are being used for gaming, and you have nothing left for anything else without interrupting the game flow. So faster averages, but more microstutter, which is why I have been on this more core bent for several years now, because I don't think, now this is somewhat of an opinion, I'll grant that, you could disagree with me, it's okay. I am of the opinion that 80 frames per second that never dips below 60, so an average of 80 and a 1% low of 60, is a superior gaming experience than 100 frames per second that dips to 40. 80 average, 61%. 100 average, 41%. Now, not all the time, not every game, depends on what you're doing. Here's another point to consider. At the time I gave that advice, the Ryzen 7 2700X had been on sale for about $150. The 3600X and the 5600X launched for $250 to $300. So the 8-core chip was $100 cheaper, installed in cheaper B450 boards. You didn't need a 500 series board. I mean, okay, you don't need a 500 series board, but there were still new in-box 400 series boards for like $79. So you could buy a Ryzen 7 2700X for $150. It came with a cooler, a really nice one, the Wraith Prism RGB hefty cooler, 4 direct contact heat pipes, and it installed in $80 motherboards. Now we're at 4K at high detail. We're at 60 frames a second. It's very nice and very playable. Very smooth performance. This particular game needs this pointed out, even though I said it already in the 1440p comparison video. While it is true that you can get very similar frame rates on an i7 7700K, the truth of the matter is this game is smoother. It feels smoother on an 8-core machine versus a 4-core machine. The interesting thing is it doesn't show up in the actual benchmark results, the minimum, the maximum, the average, the 1% minimum, the 0.1% minimum. The charts are very similar between an 8, a 6, and a 4-core CPU. But having played this game on all these CPUs, having actually driven around and done what you're watching right here, let me tell you, there is a real tangible feel difference in terms of frame pacing between the various processors. Now this is not true of most current games. Most current games are fine on a 4-core 8-thread processor, but it is starting to change. And it's one of those things that you don't really notice until you actually experience it, and then it just stares you in the face. If you've never used anything other than a 4-core processor or a 4-core 8-thread processor, you may be thinking, what's the big deal? The charts look fine, the frame rate's fine, the minimums are fine. Yeah, but once you actually experience it, there's a certain tangible smoothness to the game. It's not about frame rates, it's about frame pacing. Now we move on to Grand Theft Auto 5, a game that loves Intel processors. I have not published the comparison with Ryzen yet using the latest drivers and everything, but that will come up on the gaming channel very soon. This has the largest spread of performance between Ryzen 7 and the i7 of any of the games that I've tested here, simply because this game absolutely loves Intel chips. If you're a GTA 5 fan, Intel or bust. Now we are playing today at very high detail. This game is generally more CPU bound than it is graphics card bound, but very high detail at 4K still stresses the graphics card. That being said, at times you will see that 98% drop down. It did briefly just a second ago, and throughout about the 15 minutes of playtime I put into this, it did drop down in various scenes, but most of the time it is fairly well stressed. Take a look at the CPU usage. We are using way more than 4 cores here. Now at 1080p and to some extent 1440p, it's not as big of a deal. It doesn't use the extra processing power as much. But at 4K, I notice it does kick up. So there is a benefit to having extra cores and extra processing power as you ramp up the resolution. Even though it's still primarily graphics card bound, it does become more demanding overall. So it's smoother, but it is still in fact perfectly playable even at 4K on a 4-core 8-thread i7. It's just nicer on a 6 or 8 core chip.